Hey, well, welcome to the Dream Labs. Dr. Contrast Live here. Very good to have you on board today. Hope all is well. And I'm just going to use today to kind of bring us back a little bit of history on the process we were working with last Thursday. We spent a little time doing some revisiting the G12 series, which was kind of refreshing in a way. I haven't seen that one and looked at it in quite some time. So we thought we'd go back and look at some histrionics of that whole program. And I thought, well, we made some good progress with the initial program about a year ago or a few months ago. But I think some of the progress being made now is much, much fresher. And I think I want to go back and just review some things and show you a little bit of progress we've made since last Thursday. And I'm putting together some really interesting program pieces together on what this next generation or this phase process is going to look like. Initially, I think a lot of the things that we were looking at in the initial G12 study was a GTR that Origin put out. And it had some nice features on it. For example, it was a little bit of a rounded nose. It had some interesting, very low profile, but it didn't have a GTR or a race car character to it. So we kind of take it on as our own little project in-house. We kind of make some facelifting work on it and see what we could do with it. And so little by little, we kind of generated a lot of things, went through a lot of variations on theme, and finally we settled on something. And lo and behold, after going back and through some of the portfolio pieces on what we had arrived at a couple of months ago, I think it was time to go back in and maybe bring it up to speed. And quite honestly, I think a lot of it too had to do with the fact that maybe we want to go back in and look at it, maintain some of the character or the flavor of the vehicle, the stance, some of the design features, some of the overhangs, and some of the offsets that were a part of the initial program, and that shark nose drop, and some of the sponsors and canards that we're dealing with, but yet bring it back maybe a little bit, maybe not so far out, but bring it back a little bit into more of a GT LMP car that can be done in the next 10 to 15 years. So not so much span moving out there in an outer space program like the Origin thing did, but to take that principle and bring it back into more of an LMP car, let's say, as I said, 10 to 50 years out. So let me get started here. Let's last Thursday, we went through a couple of ballpoint pen sketches here, maybe looking at some front-end graphics, maybe making some facial changes on some of the character of the machine we already started. And this one was interesting, but I thought, what we lost here, I think, was the cavity or the floating aspect of the cabin and behind the wheels, or between the fender flares or the outriggers. It filled in a little bit, and it had kind of a little more solid, I think, in terms of what my character might look like. So it was an interesting look at this lobster claw front end on this thing. But I think we lost a lot of drama in that floating pod piece, that human survival cell, the cockpit area. We lost a little bit of that floating element. So went from that back into this one, a little bit more of that same contact and the actual floating module itself, then the fender wells, a little bit of a different response, and then putting some dihedrals up on top of the upper ceiling. Then we switched over and went down to a little bit of an elevation study here to kind of put a little bit of a side view look at this thing, what that thing might look like in the elevation. And interesting that the initial piece we did was a little bit softer through here, and we just kind of floated, and it wasn't really as dramatic on the inner piece here. In the mid cabin area, but I thought we might go back and look at that and just get a little choppy with it, a little bit more aggressive with it, and so a lot more substance. So we actually looked at that. So those are the first pass of sketches we did. Then we put this off to one side here for a moment. Then we did a little bit of this again, a little more aggressive in that side, almost like a fractured front module, mid cabin, and then rear module. Interesting how that began to look into. Beginning to resolve a little bit more of a contemporary LMP car, not so much, as I said, advanced systems, then into a perspective, not bad overall. We kept that little floating look out front here, which I think is still pretty important with the overall concept of the machine itself. And I think looking at this piece was interesting from the point of view of the stance here. I thought that some of the sway lines, that sway line was still there, but we kind of broke it up a little more shelf into this thing and gave it a little bit more of a shoulder to it, and then really stepped it back with this big intake piece with the engine system, the midship, so rear engine. And then again, this is an interesting gesture here, almost like a Porsche longtail. We actually extended that thing out to give ourselves some more of a tail section to work with. And I really think this is a lot more aggressive in terms of where we were with the elevation. Again, that front wheel pod to work through. That form still, so that sway line still comes through and follows through, and we have a little more offset in here and a lot more dramatic intake area for the engine itself. So that was interesting there. So that was the second phase we did last Thursday. But then let's go back to the original. So this is the original piece here. Look at the difference between that one, and we can bring this one back here. Pardon me just for a moment here. Look at the difference between and the substance between that sketch and if we can get them all together on the same screen. Let's do this. That one to that one. It's pretty close. I'm just going to bring this up just a bit here. See what we can come up with. And a little bit, but look at the difference in the gesture, especially here. All of a sudden, it's all one slab. And this is a lot more offset in it, just a little more crown to it, and a little more flow to it. So I think that kind of helped a little bit. So let's kind of get that out of the way here, and we'll carry on with some conversation. So let's go back. This is some of the last generation we did in the final studies, some 3-4 months ago. And again, I still like the fact that there's a lot of float between the survival cell and the fenders, and the outriggers right and left in the front end study. A lot more character. This could need some more. I like to kick back in through this and maybe extend it a little bit more. And this is a little bit on the flush side, just a little bit of a widow's peak or a flare. You get that intake to work, but really not quite as dramatic as we want it to be. So from that study, I went ahead and did a couple of little quick pencil sketches based off of that one and went to this. Let's see what you think of this guy. Went from that to that. Notice a couple of changes here, and I think it really made a big difference in terms of putting together a little more substance in the machine. Now notice, this was the original, and it still has a little bit of flavor. No, notice we extended the nose, brought that shark nose in a little bit, changed the sponson up front just a little bit more wicked line to it. And again, kept that same fender, but really opened that up and dropped them in a little bit more, a lot more slope, and really changed the character of the front end. So it drops off a little bit quicker, comes into the front wheel pant, and then it goes back rearward. Now look at the gesture here. Instead of going inboard with an inboard line, we would pick up that high point line and brought it through, and then add a little bit more surface in here. And then instead of having that chop off in the upper, brought it back and just kept it for aeroflow, just a nice little straightforward shot right back into the form itself. So I think this really began to notice. Look at the offset here, where this is real subtle, how we drop that off, how this really opens up and begins to pick up a real vacuum in terms of getting that intake to really kind of function for us. So this is kind of a fun piece here, and I think a lot more a little closer to what we're after in terms of an LMP car here. And from that, let me just get this out of the way here for a second here. That was the original sketch. So there's the facelift on that one, and there it is inside. Now look at the elevation in this thing. Now we're starting to get some real interesting character. This whole downhill run, this whole kick is much, much different. And I think a lot stronger in terms of putting together the pieces. Look how really dramatic. And again, we roll off the front wheel real tight drum to the front wheels. Then we kick it all uphill, and we bring this vacuum out and really step this surface out, which just picks up this plan view right here. Big difference in opening that and right back to normal. And notice, again, we noticed here, but I think it was a big help to get rid of it. Go to almost like a Porsche long tail run or speed tail look, extending instead of dropping it off and bringing it back and creating an angled wheel pant like we did in some of the other sketches. This really kind of puts together a whole new format in terms of having a real long span, a lot of uphill kick, real low upper, a little bit of a dihedral change up on top, which I think is going to be helpful for some turbulence and airflow. And instead of floating the upper, like the original sketch we did, really drop this thing in and just let it run right through into the tail section. So this is a front 3/4 facelift, I think a lot stronger, a little bolder looking. And again, the elevation really tells a story, but the whole thing is a downhill leap. Very nice suspended section for survival cell, but a whole different character. I think really adding that link to it really helped to kind of accentuate the process of getting into more of a contemporary LMP car. So there we are there with that guy, and that was a facelift. We'll come back to that in a few moments here. Let's go back now. This is the rear 3/4. It initially did something always disturbed me about this rear 3/4. Trying to make too much out of it. Again, here's that floating upper we're referring to. Again, then there's the same basic gesture, but again, we picked up that same sway line here. Instead of going inboard, we really picked it up and dropped it. And we had a little bit of that little shelf, that catwalk out here for the rear intake, and then put the intake in place with just ahead of the rear wheels. A lot of the G12 character in there, and again, did we want to keep that? I'm not sure. I mean, we might go back to that, although I don't think it's going to be possible to go to more of a traditional LMP car now. And again, this is the side view we generated off of that initial sketch some time ago. This is an older sketch, about 2 or 3 months ago. It falls in line with the front 3/4 we showed you just a few moments ago. But it gets pretty busy back in through, and it just didn't really look like it was just resolving itself well. So transparency and truth be told, I just didn't really care for the fact that it was too busy, too many things going on, and trying to simplify the whole process down to make it much more of a cleaner statement and a much more arrow system that we're trying to look at. So from that study, we went from there to this. All of a sudden, now look at the difference. Look at the difference in the box section back here. Let's just kind of get these guys in place here. Look at hopefully, look at the difference in the offsets now. Much more dramatic in terms of getting this thing a lot cleaner and much more box-like, almost again, long tail, real adding some length to it and boxing the whole process off for some downforce and some dihedrals and other areas in the rear recorder section made a big difference, and I think a lot cleaner back here than it is here. And again, I really like the big boulder offset. Really makes it, that's in a plan, this thing really steps out and makes a huge difference in the overall form of the machine itself. So those are kind of neat looking approaches here. And again, much, look how we just streamlined that whole up and brought it right on through, as opposed to kind of floating it like we did in the initial piece up here. Bringing that straight back, I think it really helped to clean up the whole rear section area and get this rear cabin area a lot more substance. And again, the offsets in here, this thing comes in, kicks back, and goes back out to a skirt and do some bending systems behind the front wheels. Much cleaner all the way through. And again, what I liked about that too, and this whole gesture change, was this. Look at the difference in the actual elevation now. Now it's got some real strength to it. That whole form now looks a lot more streamlined. It's simpler. It's not as complicated, yet it's pretty dramatic, and it still maintains some of the original flavor we were after with the actual concept sketch itself. So really interesting stuff here. So that's where we are today, and I think we made some adjustments. So once I finish that family of sketches, so what would happen if we go back and go a little explore some of this look here we're after with this big shoulder offset in the rear area, and then this drop lowering the upper into the actual body form itself. What would it look like if we started doing some exploratory work on putting that thing together? So I did a real quick series of real fast pencil sketches here. Let's go back and let's get rid of this guy for a moment here. We'll take this out of context. We'll get these guys out of the way. Put those over here, and I'll be right with you. Go back to this guy. Now, we did a series of sketches here. I think I'm going to get them all on the same page here at all. We might be, there they are right there. The whole series of variations. These are really quick pencil sketches on Canson paper. Just to look at maybe basic gesture again. That same strong sway line going on with how that high hip comes up, then drops back in again. It gives us a real strong long tail system here. I think that really kind of helped to tell a story. And so there's an elevation study, another variation out there with a high fin tail section on it. Another variation down here in elevation, kind of a different look at the box section down below, but the actual flavor itself was really held intact. And I think this rear recorder is trying to get a little more simplified with that real tail section instead of getting into those offsets with that swallowtail like the original sketches did. Just didn't seem to have the same impact that these guys did. So I think a lot of this has to do with really getting into some really interesting stuff here in terms of putting together the process of, again, getting a real good, not so far out of the realm of a good LMP car to look at as far as surfaces and textures go. So very interesting process itself. And then again, another drill, look how that whole bulb system comes out, really grows and comes back into a body form, and really it makes a clean, simple statement. It's a lot of activity going on in the forms itself, but there's a lot more, as far as I'm concerned, a much fresher look at an LMP as opposed to being more of a space vehicle a la Origin. No disrespect there at all. I think they did a nice job with it for what it was worth, but it didn't have that GTR process look that we're after here. So these real quick pencil sketches really helped me see potential of getting that offset put together and how do we want to treat it in terms of getting into perspective views here. So I'm going to keep that handy, and we'll just go through a couple more variations on this guy here. Let's just see what we're after. So we come back into this thing. Let's say we went back in and then just do this. Let's go back and get this set up here. Let's go a gesture. Let's come back in through here. Get this thing set up. Come back in again. Count this thing back. Drop it off. Pick up that real strong sway line and just let that kind of kick uphill and then drop back. Let's give ourselves some room here in perspective. Let's go to get that. There's our drive line here. Let's go to get that off there here. Into there. Drop that off. Let's go back in through here and get that same, comes back to that. And then for that, we've got that nice little offset here. Let's put that wheel in place. Now let's go back and get that thing to really offset here. This into this. There's a basic gesture right there. There's the body form we're looking for. That comes back into kicks. This drops into fender, picks up a little bit of the inside piece. I'm going to reverse in this process just a bit here. Going to get that to set, draw that through, then pick up that hip. Now let's go back in there and pick up that upper. See just a little bit of that. There's that valley we're looking at here, the little sway line that comes up, kicks, drops back in, comes across. And look how quickly that came together. Offset, back to the kick. I mean, look at the difference there. Another variation, maybe. Take that into that line. There we go. That's not bad. A bit of a front kick on it here. Where the new sponson is. Rear wheel. Kick up. Now notice, look at the offset in that plan view. I think that really makes a huge difference in just getting that whole thing to kick out of there. Look at that. Big difference in the overall gesture of this form. I think really making some good sense here. So let me just move along here very quickly. Let me kind of pencil this in. Running out of lead here. Hang on a second. Put in a replacement. There we go. Ooh, I have to refuel this thing. Hang on a second there, guys. Interesting. Well, all of a sudden we ran out of juice. So while we're talking about this thing, I think, what do you think of the overall flavor of the gesture of this guy? I mean, this is making more sense in terms of getting a little more of that LMP car put together. Much more contemporary piece. Let me just kind of feed this out here. Yep, we're out. Hang on a second here, guys. We'll reload this beauty. Let's see. There's 3 of them right there. Thank you for your patience. It's the first time I've done that, so pardonnez-moi. Ran out of juice here. Let's put that all back together again. And we'll put the cap back on it and get back to action. Let's see what that does. Let's see if we can get more. Yeah, there we are. Now we're loaded here. We go. Yeah. In. There we are. A little bit of the line. That comes across, it comes up, picks up itself here. The inside line here, it comes back and picks that up. Now let's get that upper. Runs through just a bit more. Let's put a nice couple of big dump boxes back here. just again, still exploring ways to go right through, making this much more of a legitimate LMP car. I mean, I'm not unhappy at all with what we've dealt thus far. I think we can just go a little further with some exploratory shape work to kind of keep it all nice and clean. Let's put a little sidewall in here, drop that out. And vertical. Get that out of the way. A bit of rear lighting on this thing. Get this nice big sponson in place here. Some nice loose little studies here. A bit of relief, intake. Let's see what happens when we put that dihedral right down in the center line here and break it back just a bit. There it is. Little movable plot back there. All of a sudden, it's got some personality to it. Hey, hi Jeff. Hey David, missed part 1 last week. Looks so cool so far today. Hey, thanks for joining us here, gang. David and Jeff, thank you. Very super cool stuff, especially after Porsche's debut of their new race car. Yeah, it's interesting. That new machine, that project, I think it was at 25, I think it is, Jeff. Really neat stuff. We'll get rid of this smudge here, sorry. Interesting material. Let's go back and review some of these. This is really the product of getting some of these guys kind of bring into play here. This is where we were, just some pencil sketches. Here's some facelifted things we did here. This is where we were. Looking at some of these new facelifts in terms of, those are basic pencil sketches there, David and Jeff. Went back in after last week and really kind of revised some of the things we started with. And let me go back just real briefly here and a real quick overview here. So we started there, and let me go back here and just go real quickly here. So pardon me here, gang. We started there last Thursday with some pen sketches and trying to update the the G12 series, some front end graphics, and it wasn't bad. But this one was a little bit disturbing because we lost a lot of that vacuole area, the survival cell defender well, and then the elevation changed a little bit here. So that was where we started today. A little bit of perspective study, and getting a little bit more. And again, the gesture's kind of torched a little bit here, just really kind of twisted in a sense of being too many pieces and fractionalized. There's something about this gesture down here that started to look pretty interesting. So I'm playing off of that same sway line and working with it. And putting it in perspective helped a little bit, but it still didn't have that, and that open area back there still was a little bit disturbing from getting into a really good, what I refer to as a contemporary, maybe 10-year-out LMP car. So this is what we're trying to really achieve with this G12, just bringing it back in a little bit and giving it some real substance, but yet not losing some of the initial design flavor. So that was that one. And I went back into this. This was the original front 3/4 sketch, and I still like that shark nose appearance, dropping it in, survival cell, fender to fender. And a little bit of that sway line kick, but it was a little bit flush, just a little bit of an offset here, just a bit too flush for the overall look at the overall form, again, for a GT system. So from that piece, went to this, and just a lot more dramatic in terms of really getting some really interesting offsets. Dropped the nose, still kept the same spacing. Dropped the canopy a little bit more, added some dihedral up on top. Same basic sway line, but really stretched it and get the offset in the plan. We really ran and rolled that thing off of there and get a little more guts to this thing, get more body to it. Hey, Shadow, how are you, man? Good to have you on board. And then from that front three, back to an elevation. And I was really looking at coming across the board with looking at this piece right here. This is the one that kind of sparked that sketch. That little study there. Looked at some of here, just kind of maybe minimizing the fender, stretching out the vacuole here and getting a lot more intake in the quarter array. So that was part of the rationale behind that. Good to see you. And then all of a sudden, coming back in here, welcome. Elevation site. So from the front three-quarter, this is the initial rear three-quarter, and as we did before here, David and Jeff. It started with that. It was interesting. We had the floating upper and had a little bit of cavity back here, and trying to get that big, huge exhaust system back here, more futuristic in terms of instead of not being again potential stretch for an LMP. But too far advanced yet. We'll get there eventually. But I wanted to bring it back to again as a conventional LMP. So close a little bit. From my point of view, very busy back here. Didn't have the same substance or the same simplicity or the same drama. Then went back to the side view. That's what it would look like in elevation. So from that rear three-quarter study initially some months ago, revised it to this rear three-quarter. Look at the difference in the offsets now. How that thing really has changed its character, its personality, especially in the elevation. I mean, this thing's got some real, I think it's some potential now because it has a lot more guts. Number one, it's guttier. Number two, it's been simplified. Number three, it still maintains some of the design flavor we started with, but it has a lot more of that, again, to be redundant, LMP 5-10 years out that could possibly come to pass. Drop the upper end, instead of floating the upper, brought it right back. A lot more dihedral here, kind of boxed off the direction, almost like a Porsche Speedtail on 911 or the 962S. The long tail series, same process. And look at the side view. All of a sudden, it begins to really make a huge statement in terms of where we are. Again, this little offset in there was interesting too. So, Dave Pitter there, Shadow, thanks. Keep thinking today is Miami. Me too. Me too, David. But anyhow, this is where we are. Proportion. Yo, boy, is it ever. You got it right, Jeff. Right down to the nitty gritty of proportion. Whereas it's interesting you brought that up, Jeff, because you look at some of this. Even here, the proportion was almost 1 to 1 to 1. It didn't have that same stretch. Didn't have the overall girth that whole process of getting proportions down. So I took the liberty to really stretch it a little bit and exaggerate the form, front to rear, a lot more, a little lower, a little wider, and a lot more guts to it. So I think that's where we were. Then from that series, I'm wanted to explore some Canson sketches. What possibilities we might have with some of the stuff we're dealing with here. These are just really quick pencil sketches on, again, that proportion change. See what we might come up with. And I think it's really interesting that the whole idea, Project What If, yeah, that's a good one. By the way, that's a good point too, Shadow, and Jeff and Dave. We're looking for a new name for this thing too. Instead of being a G12 or whatever it might refer to, this is now, we own this thing in terms of what our our GT has come a long way. Yeah, it has come a long way. So it needs a new name, maybe a new aspect. Maybe it's a numerical identification of somewhat, but that could be very helpful. Pardon me. So based on what we did last week, back in today and just this morning, we did some really quick pencil sketches, some gesture sketches on, again, keeping that same sway line and putting a little more character, intake areas. So the canopy, do we go lower, further forward? Do we can maintain it? Go back into that. So these are little quick studies to kind of give me a guidepost as to which way to begin to develop this thing as we go further with it. So then we go from that into this, and then here we are with that rear three-quarter study. Now let's go back and just finish this up a little bit. There it is. Back in through here, canopy, upper and header. There it is. A little bit of cooling system here. A little bit of a dihedral up on top. Take it on through. Notice a lot cleaner in the air box back here. Much, much cleaner. For obvious reasons. Didn't have to do so complicated. Then we come back in through here. Start on the rear wheel about right in there. And up front, there it is. So that gesture is pretty interesting. So we put a bit of shadow in this guy here just for a second. Going to ground it just a touch. So there we are. Little 3/4 study here. And picking up that same long tail aspect that we were talking about earlier here. I think it's got a lot more character now. There's just something about this. Pardon me, I'm losing my voice here. A lot fresher, I think. It's starting to take on a very good amorphic look to it here. So let's do this. Pardon me. I'm going to extend the nose out of this thing a little bit more too. Let's see what happens when we do that. Just going to get that in place. Just going to gesture down here, just trying to see what exploratory thing we can come up with here to kind of get this guy to save itself here just a bit. Get those dihedrals to run through it again. Change a little bit of that character there. See what happens here. Pretty loose little studies here, gang, but I just want to get a character established here if we can. Change the facelift of this thing. Get some front canards off this guy. A bit of canopy change. Inside form. And the offset. I think we're getting somewhere there with that form. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think it's got some character to it. If it's starting to take on a personality, I think it might have a lot more character and impact as far as LMP is concerned. So, what do you think, gang? So far, so good? Get that shoulder to ring off that thing. There's my section. The pursuit here is to find a nice rhythm in terms of getting some shapes and forms down to really get this thing to kind of crank at it. Stuart, she's getting meaner. Hey, Stuart, good to have you on board. Chief, how are you? So far, so good. I'll just give you a couple of heads up here. This is a generation from a bunch of sketches that we did again earlier today, just some real quick elevation sketches from where we are. And I went back into some of the, I won't waste a lot of time here, but that's a 3/4 of the new facelift that we're doing with it. And coming back in here, and then where's the front 3/4? Then some of the initial, here's the front 3/4, start there. Whole new look at getting a sway line to work with, a little bit more of an offset in the engine intake area. Much more aggressive, I think. And again, much more of a traditional LMP car. Didn't lose some of the floating cockpit area that we were after. But that gesture and the elevation really made a huge difference, I think. I mean, it just really has a lot more guts to it. I think simplified, more GT, LMP, less space vehicle, but it still maintains some of the same characteristics. So I think we're making some real progress here, Stuart. Now, that was the intent of today's. Much sharper, actually a lot crisper, a lot more geometric, but yet softer it needs to be and sheer where it has to be. So there's a front 3/4. And there's a rear 3/4, a lot more offset here, and getting a lot more of a long tail look to it, and a lot more platform in the rear section. Numero uno, and there it is there. So that was it. And then into those studies from this morning, into some Canson sketch studies, just to look at maybe some elevation changes and some gesture changes and the like. Some of these are going to be covered up a little bit here, but that's a majority of little, real fast, real quick GT touring sketches we looked at to kind of verify the fact that we've got a new muscle in the rear quarter. The mid cabin and the front cabin's been dropped and suppressed a little bit more, so it's a lot more GT-like. Yeah, really cool to get there. You're right, Shadow. So that's that guy. And then I'm just doing some little empathic sketches front to rear, the three to see what kind we get here. How much box section do we want to really float this thing off in plan view, or we want to keep it pretty sedate? So I think a lot of that has to come back to. Let's start another one here. Let me do this real quickly. So that's a 3/4, and again, a little bit rougher in terms of being softer, but I still want to get that plan view to kind of kick out of there. So that's an interesting approach to look at it. So there's a sketch here. Let's go back in here. Again, another gesture change here. Just kind of get some speed form down to get this thing really. Hey, hello there, Ballistic. How's everything? Good to see you, Chief. How's everything doing? Pretty good. Thanks for joining forces here today. Again, let's just kind of pick this thing a little bit here. I'll go back and review in a moment here, Ballistic, about where we are. Go back to this. Get this canopy to drop in real sleekly. There it is, almost full forward. Do we want to go back and reverse it a little bit? Maybe. Show where those wing canards are right in there. There's a little offset here, the canopy. Put that offset into here. There's that little tail section, inside fender line. Intake, offset. Real loose little gestures here to kind of give ourselves some indication of where the scales are going to be, what we're going to be moving with here. A little bit of detail. A little bit of section that walk out there. Let's get that rear split. Let's plant where the wheels are going to be. Oh, right in there. A little bit of an offset here. Right on the body side. So it's going to give us some idea of what the scale of that proportion is going to look like when we crank that thing out. By what? Let's see. Stuart, I have such an appreciation for your design and drafting ability. My skill sets are elsewhere, but I'm routinely blown away by what you do compose. Well, I mean, that's just a lot of practice time. Really, Stuart, you guys, you do really, really well. So I've been able to catch a stream. Glad to get. I'm glad you're on board too, Cowboy. It's good to have you on board here. And these are really quick gestures. I mean, I think the sum total of today's stream is this. We went through some variations on theme last week on this G12 thing, which I think was interesting. We had some good stuff, but I'm really concerned about the fact that it wasn't really quite getting to the GT LMP machine we wanted to look at. So I went back in and revised some of the surfaces and looked at some of the. I want to keep some of the character or the flavor of the initial G12 we did. There were some good things done there, but to bring it back a little bit and kind of condense it a little bit more and give it a little more, some more offset and some more character, I think was absolutely paramount. So that's what the reason for today's look at is go back and reevaluate like a phase 2, like the title of the program, just to kind of phase in what we're looking at for. Let's kind of get this all set up here. There's a little offset in the canard here, and there's a little support strut. There we are. Just really interesting little concept sketches here about what we're after. Yeah, we need to look at those hypercar rules a bit more and see what we could. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing to kind of look at here. There's the upper, instead of floating it, taking it right back, and then blending it into the actual body form, so then kicking that rear hip up a little bit. And I think that in combination with this stuff here, we actually go front and rear. All of a sudden, look at the difference in character there, gang. We've got some really good, strong substance, I think, to work with here. Let's kind of move this up just a bit. What do you think? Let me stop there for anybody. Evaluation here. I mean, it's got a lot more. I think it's a greater presence, quite honestly. I mean, it's not a great sketch, but I'm just looking for a theme here. If the theme is there, we'll slow it all down and kind of refine it just a little bit more and really take advantage of doing some really interesting exploratory work, like we did with this pass here in some of the Canson sketches, just really getting a lot more flavor, for example, and getting a lot more character into it, a little bit more juice into the thing. So the negative space and the size will help shape air, but we need to use all of it on this rear element. Yep, every one of those will do it. And I said we still have that draft through here, and I think we can actually go back and revise this front portion here and put a nice little reverse here, like an air through. Yeah, in the front wheels. That can kind of give us a little bit ducting work right back into the area there. Which I think is huge. We do that, and we can pull out the wingless design. Yeah, the wingless design. I don't know if we could put one bonded or not. If we put a wing on this thing, what would it look like? Let's just see what happens if we do a nice little quick side view elevation here. That's what we're after. So we come back down again. So we give it that large wing. Kick it off, bring it up, break the hip, and take it through. Overhang. Canopy. Again, bite line. Offset. Real low profile. Yeah, that's kind of a neat little gesture. I think it's got some interesting surface to it. I think that's what we're trying to capture here. Let's go back in and get this now. This comes around and just marries right back. Ooh, that's kind of nice. Just clean that whole vacuum up. There it is there. What happens if we do this? Uppercase or not? Do we need that? Change the shape of that guy a little bit. We have both. I don't know, what do you think? The picture sponsors will love it. Yeah, I guess they would. Yeah, it's pretty good. That's a good one. He's a good one. They will love it. You're right. Looking good there, David. So let's just put a little bit of tone in this thing here. A little bit of an offset. Nice big massive intake. Couple of directionals overhead.
Oh yeah, no problem. I'll yeah, after we get the group, and then if for some reason there's no problem adding more buttons on over there.
There you go. There's an elevation. What do you think, gang? Let me stop right there. Just from G's jet engine in the back. There you go. Looks like a ground fighter now. Yeah, pretty interesting. I mean, it's coming together nicely, I think, as far as the concept goes. Let me stop right there for a moment and take a little bit of inventory. What do you think, gang? This is where we were. Let's go back and just put out what we did today in terms of getting some sketches development here. There's the rear three-quarter. Let me find that front three-quarter, and we'll kind of let's kick them together here. From last week, this is where we want to be. Revised front three-quarter. Anybody? Any opinion at all? What do you think? So we kept that same gesture, for example, in the actual survival cell itself. Still kept the outriggers and the fenders. Didn't lose any of that. So we're back to that square. A little nicer gesture in the elevation. I think is looking pretty good. Anybody comments? Anything on this one? I just want to get some pretty good impact and some input from where you guys are. We're going to take this thing to maybe another development study on Thursday and begin to finalize a final design here and get some good things done in terms of putting together some final illustrations for print purposes. So what do you think, guys? Let's see. Shadow, the Peugeot is trying to do it with their hyper. Yeah, they are. They're trying to do it with their hypercar. That's true. Shadow, very good. Let's see. Where are we here? Love it. And there's one vote. A big change, I think, in terms of, can't wait to tell them my idea. Hey, me too. It's going to be pretty cool. So there's a front three-quarter. Let's go back here. There's a new rear three-quarter. A little bit of a gesture change in the elevation. I think it's really gotten some interesting things. You drop the bombs on air. yeah, drop them on air. That'd be fine, Shadow. Put this thing together. It's a good team effort here. Let's put them on air. It's fun. That's what your concepts are. Nice. I'll just share some information here. So there's a rear three-quarter based on the facelift we're looking at for phase 2 and getting this into more of an LMP present day racing machine. Then today we just kind of played up of that rear three-quarter elevation into, again, another one here. Come on in here, Shadow. Good to have you on board, man. Then we did a little bit of this.
Hey, gang.
Three-quarter.
So all right.
Oh, yeah.
So you got me thinking on this thing again.
Yeah.
We were
cool.
There we can actually go. Look at that. We had it already.
How you doing, gang?
So no, I had a couple of crazy ideas with this when we were talking about it last, and we started to bring it back.
Yeah.
I got to go to the Dr. Contrast. All right, so so for this front section,
Yes.
this was a good view of it. Do you have what was the one? Okay, yeah, here. This is better.
That one or the earlier one?
Well, this one's good. Yeah. So what I was thinking about doing is beaking this down a little bit even more. And then building out a canard system, an active canard system there.
Dropping that down?
Yeah, have it come down and beak out, and then you do like a canard system there to actively level and then also use downforce.
Gotcha. So this actually have a hollow in it here.
Right.
So drop in and do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, so there's nothing in the new concept about active aero.
Well, good. Now we can use that.
Which is shocking because the hypercars, you would think that would be something. But I mean, if they're basing them off of real cars.
Oops, there we are.
And then I had so remember how we were talking about this? So you started to spider it off with the pod because we have enclosed enclosed motors that are inside because this is now. It's electric electric in hub.
Right.
So and the great thing about that is it puts the weights to the corners. But if we stretched it out even further, like really took away a lot of the body work and went crazy with it, and then just did a leading edge and a like a basically smoothing edge off the wheels.
Okay.
Really strip away. I mean, like pushing almost no air whatsoever.
A foil and a flap and no filler in between.
Yeah.
All right.
And then let's see, longer
one here.
Tucked into the rear. Yeah, you already started to do that back here, which was funny because as soon as I saw it, I was like, he's already reading my mind. Yeah, and then the bladed headlights would fit perfectly on the front canard now.
Yeah.
Because it would actually be splitting the air, but it's a great spot to put the headlights.
So you'd see that more like a vertical stand-up, right?
Yeah, and then what I was thinking it was doing is a second set next to it that actually is vertical turn vanes.
Okay.
So because it could dive into corners better without. But I think the real key on this one is to get rid of all the wings. Get rid of all the forced downforce.
Yeah.
Because with this huge space now and being sit up, we can start to grab that air from underneath and along the sides. Because the biggest problem with hypercars, especially any high-speed car, is keeping it on the ground, believe it or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then not only that is using the air efficiently.
Absolutely.
Because
cool.
you try and create downforce to keep the car on the ground, but then you're also creating drag by doing that. But if you're basically reusing that space to do this, then
got it.
We're cheating. We're cheating the system.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So I had a drawing. It was very rough that I'll show you from the top.
Plan view.
Which looked very, very different. It almost looked like an X, and then had the nose out the front.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then it's very negative.
Yeah.
Like there's almost nothing to it.
Yeah, that's okay, because we started with that floating cockpit here. That might still fit
right,
the paradigm.
and that's what I was thinking. It's really taking it to
floating.
11.
Yep, really floating.
Because if you look at a fighter cockpit, most of the stuff that surrounds them is there to keep them alive.
That's right.
But in our cases, like we're electric, we're also very small. There's no life support, stuff like that. So and there's no radars and stuff like that. We can make that a very, very small spot.
Very compact. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's cool.
So
there you go. Those are the elements. No, I think those elements would work pretty nicely. I think so. If I just let me hang on a second here. So if we looked at that basic process you're saying about lighting here, if we can get rid of that guy for a second. So we're saying that wheel system could actually come in and do this. You'd have that. Then you'd have something come off the top of that with a blade surface, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just enough to clean the air up over the tire, because we know that as the tire rolls forward, that's the tumbling air that comes over the top is the most disruptive.
So we're still seeing
the second most disruptive is along the
sidewall. So if that does that, so we're still seeing a lot of tire in there, right? But you're seeing that kind of a float over the top. That's it, just a blade.
Yep. And then this would be your headlight, and then also could mock as a turning vane. Yeah. So if you could flare off the back of the headlight to be a turning vane.
So then that would come up with a secondary piece here, right? Roughly like so. Yeah. So now does that attach to this?
Yeah, it would have to, because it becomes an element of moving.
So and then just so I'm clear here, now this is still all. It's got to be a partial skin here somewhere. So it's got to be.
Yeah, it's just enough to cover up the tire to clean up the air over it.
So then we've got this, and then in between.
We can even go a little bit crazy and do a half wrap around it.
Yeah, you could take that around
with a small negative air intake.
So you take the surface around.
Mm-hmm.
Take that around. And now let's see. Now this is all.
Well, you probably want to go up and then flare it back, because this air moving underneath here is clean.
So because
it's collapsing tire, right? Over it.
This is tire.
Yep.
So that's tire. Now what happens here? You want to bring that back up?
We need something to be able to clean the air up off the back of the tire.
So
Formula One's not allowed to do this, because they're not allowed to have anything that impedes the tire within so many inches.
You got that same gesture, right? So that would do that. If we could kind of pull that off. Then over here, you come in through here. Now you've got this dropping in. That's dropping in. This is an active aero flap here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, really tuck it down right in front of the driver.
There it is right there.
And get those.
So there's canopy. This is all negative here. That drops off, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, essentially it would be grabbing a large chunk of the air to use.
Okay, so that's that. Then we've got this. And this is now a canopy. That comes uphill. That kicks up the kick. There is that basically.
Yeah. You're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, I'll have to kind of explore this.
really try and strip away as much of the body. Since the good thing is we don't have cooling systems. We don't have. There's a lot of things that we don't have in this because it's electric. And that's a huge deal, because you're not, a lot of the canards and bodywork and stuff feeds into radiators and mainly radiators is the big one.
It's not there. So if we look at that again, you can actually take this almost like a fender form.
Right. That's what I was thinking. But the catch is it has to attach to the suspension because it's going to be basically pushing. It's going to be steering the car through with the air as well.
So that could
think about going into like Indianapolis. The court, it's a very high speed corner. It's down. It's away. You need that. You basically need a vane to turn you in. You need more air pushing than tires moving you.
Okay.
You want that aero grip. But it's actual lateral aero grip, which most cars don't even think about.
No, they don't. No, you're right there.
So, but I mean, we're pushing 300 miles an hour is what we're thinking with this, and we want, to be able to steer around somebody. That tire contact would be you would destroy tires.
Definitely. So I think
So if you had vanes to turn you to help steer, dart the car, that'd be huge.
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture out what happens here now with this.
Yeah, how it attaches to the suspension is the tricky part, or at least the rest of the car.
Well, that whole face could come back in. If you look at that in the front view, you can do this to this in the opening, then it can right back and drop in.
Yeah.
And pick up that.
Yeah.
Some sort of, and it would still maintain that offset we're looking at here in this guy right here.
Yeah, really, it's
all.
all about stripping away as much as we can to basically not push the air that we don't need to.
Well, that's good fodder to look at. In other words, but I think the gesture, you still like this overall gesture?
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
I do too. It's a big change. I think.
See, going with this wingless concept, I think is huge, because when we're once you get past like 220, 230. Everything that creates drag starts to get exponential.
Yeah, that's right. It flutters. So you don't want to add that LMP.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it depends.
Possible.
What we could do is merge that straight into the tail.
That's true too. That could just
because if it's only is it adding stability, or is it actually creating force, and
that would be like the Jag 14 series. Just bring it right up off the tail section. There you go. Yeah, again, some good things to work on for Thursday. That's cool. But we made some progress today. Shadow, thanks for dropping by, man. Good stuff.
All right, everyone.
Take care. What do you think? Let's take a survey here. What do you think, guys? You in?
I'll put you back in there.
Hey, very good. Thanks again, Shadow. Good to see you. All right, gang. Anybody? Any voting here at all, Shadow-wise? Good. Let's see. We'll just kind of wrap it up here real quickly. Anybody any commentary at all from the overall presentation? And by the way, thank you so much for hanging on today, gang. It's a good program today. Thank you so much. Good stuff. Anybody feel free to commentary. Yays, nays, positive, negatives. Who was that guy? That was the wingman, Shadow. Very cool. Some good stuff. We're trying to strip away most of the unnecessary skin work here and still get this thing to become a hypercar and make it function and have some newness about it. So there we are, gang. Looking good. Good program today. A lot of progress since last Thursday, I think. We've kind of stepped it out a little bit further and taken some real chances here. It's kind of neat. So anybody, please, I'll give you a couple minutes here. If anybody like David, Mara, Jeff, Ballistic, Stuart, anybody at all, comment-wise. Likes, dislikes? Did we right? That's right. Did we great? You're absolutely right, Shadow. That's what the whole name of the game plan is. Shadow, Stuart. Any questions? Looks good. Hey, thanks, Ballistic. Good to have you on board again. Thank you for joining us today. I know we've got a very tight schedule, so very good to have you on board. Let's see. Hey, Stuart, you still hanging in there? What do you think? Anybody there? Positive, negatives, yays and nays? What do you think of progress-wise here? I think it's been a really good step in the ability. I like the suggestions for altering. Yeah, I do too. I think we're just kind of changing the whole the one sketch here that we did earlier. Let me sort of bring it back to our memory here. But was it one of these guys? Yeah, I think. Yeah, look at this. It was just extremely complicated back here. It didn't need to have that much drama to it. It just opened things up, and it was just trying to make things happen without really any real good substance for supporting it. So I think getting back to some of the stuff we did here, for example, in this sketch, when we really got back and resolved that thing nice and cleanly back there, it made a huge difference. I think that's what we're referring to. I think Ballistic, much easier. So getting some good headway in here, guys. Good. So all that to say that, again, thank you so much, gang, for joining forces today. It's really great to have you on board. And we'll look forward to seeing you on Thursday. We're going to carry this saga one more trip to see what we can get out of it and begin to refine some things down and get some of the excess skin out of it and still have that LMP character we're after here as a result of today's piece. So please feel free to visit my website at drcontrast.com. I've got some good drawing programs there. And again, I'd love to have you people just announce that I'm on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to to 3. I like to build my audience and keep that active, so thank you for doing so. And above all else, I always end my stream here with, oh, by the way, too, please feel free to drop me a note at my email address at jim@drcontrast.com. I'd love to hear from you about what you think is vital, what you want to see done, maybe programs or things to work with. Very helpful for me to look at that. I don't want to be guilty of just assuming that I'll do this today and it'll work well. I'd just like to have you guys be part of the process. But I always and that note can be sent to jim@drcontrast.com. And once again, cannot thank you enough for the time. I will sign off for this because I think it's really important to do so. Never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks very much, gang. Have a good one, and we'll see you on Thursday at 2. Thank you. Bye-bye now.